everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. We're right here in front of the Berlin Wall of North America, the big disgrace of a wall. And as you can see, actually on this side of the wall, it's all colored and painted with all sorts of art on it. On the other side, I'll try to get a video of it later, we'll throw it in. It's very sterile and metallic on the American side. We're on the Mexican side here. I'm with Justin O'Connell. And Justin, as some of you might know, has been working with the Dollar Vigilante for years as a writer and a researcher. He also is the owner of Gold, Silver, Bitcoin. Sometimes I get it mixed up. GoldSilverBitcoin.com, which is a place where you can buy or sell gold and silver for Bitcoin, which we'll get into Bitcoin a little bit later, because as of today, and this will probably be up in a few days, and it might be higher, it might be lower, but as of today, it almost hit $500 today. It was about $230 about a month ago. So a lot of interest in Bitcoin, so we're going to get into that, and Justin's quite an expert on that, and also on the precious metals. He's been dealing in those markets. One of the other things, though, that I want to talk to him about is about how he's just moved to Tijuana from San Diego, where he's lived most of his life. But before we get into all that, Justin, got to ask you the big question. How did you become an anarchist?
Well, it's kind of a long-winded story, and although I don't really call myself an anarchist, I sort of latched onto this word naturalism. So I kind of see everything as being natural, and perhaps laws are given by nature through morality or ethics or what have you. But when I was really young, my dad wouldn't let me listen to rap music, so I wasn't able to listen to Tupac or Notorious B.I.G., and I joined Boy Scouts at one point. And in Boy Scouts, I actually learned about punk rock. And punk rock themes generally are somewhat anarchistic or maybe social democratic, which I think that, you know, if we sat down and talked, are more similar than we might usually admit. And in Boy Scouts, I learned about bands like Bad Religion, Fugazi, NoFX. NoFX has a song called about burning the Constitution. So I was like 12 years old when I started hearing these things, and I think it kind of started from there. I started questioning religion and God, the general conception of what God is, and became, I guess at that point, atheist, on my way towards a naturalist, if I had to call myself something. And from there I started questioning larger institutions like governments. And I think that that ultimately led me to where I am today, which, you know, if anything, I try to stay open-minded. I try not to maybe get mixed up with status and anarchist sort of dualism, but I think that we can find a lot of the answers to these questions in just ourselves and in nature.
And you've recently moved to Tijuana, and you've been telling me since we've been together about all the differences between Mexico and the U.S. and how there's a lot more free market down here and things like that. What made you decide to move over across this ugly wall here?
You know, I've always wanted to move abroad, and this is sort of a way of moving abroad, but also kind of staying close to home. So I've been
about 20 minutes from home here, right?
Yes, it takes me about 30 minutes to get to where I grew up, and I can cross pretty easily. There's three different lanes in which you can get into and cross. One's the Sentry card, which we've written about at the TDV, which is essentially kind of getting rid of the border if you could. You go through a background check, a criminal background check, and the U.S. authorities have to approve you to go in this lane, and it's pretty quick. I mean, it's 15 minutes at most to cross. Oftentimes, if you cross later at night, there's really no line. I have a Ready Lane card at this point, which is the second quickest, so it takes about 40 minutes when I'm driving to get into San Diego, and I don't have to commute every day. Some people do that, however, and you know, it's just like sitting in traffic in LA or something, really, in a way. It's kind of a little bit different, for sure, maybe a little more dangerous, as Adam Kokesh has mentioned, that it's not necessarily so safe to group a bunch of people in a tightly knit spot where they can't get out too easily. But other than that, it's just like LA traffic. Of course, the general lanes I try not to mess around with. Those get to be a little bit more, maybe like an hour and a half. They used to be 4 hours though, before some new additional lanes came into play. So, you know, I'm at home. You know, this is basically like the beach area that I grew up on. It's very similar. Tijuana is a very unique city. Here we are in Playas, which is essentially kind of like, you know, maybe I shouldn't say this, but it's almost like a bedroom community of San Diego. I think you noticed at the Starbucks people were speaking in English. And there's a lot of that around here. It's very beautiful around here. Towards Centro, it gets a little bit different. My good friend's Chad Deal, who's an organizer around here. He runs Cali Blah Blah Blah. He does a bunch of festivals like Rumble Fest in Tijuana. He lives over by Zona Norte, which you got to be a little bit more coy, perhaps, moving around there. Keep your eye on the authorities, because there is the Tijuana Shakedown, which It's basically police will hassle, especially gringos, and just looking for basically a payoff. The party is better here than in San Diego. Americans love to party, but they're all too scared to come down here and actually party. I was here on Halloween, and there were some pictures of San Diego parties. A lot of people down in the gas lamp district of San Diego, but nothing compared to here. There were at 3:30 in the morning as many people here as I'm sure there are out in San Diego. And although I don't party, too much, I don't like kind of being shooed out of somewhere at 1:25 right as I'm starting to maybe have fun.
Well, you know me, and I've stopped drinking now, but when I used to go out with you or for other people in San Diego till about 1:20, and then we get kicked out, and I would drive here to keep going till 5 in the morning, and a lot of people do that actually. Yeah,
a lot of people. This is a very porous border. The San Ysidro border is one of the busiest. According to Wikipedia, it's the busiest border in the world. Tijuana is a very visited city. You can tell there's so many taxis around. Although because the transportation's kind of messed up around here, a lot of locals use taxis. But that taxi demand is in part quelling tourist demand for sure.
And they had Uber here, but did they just make a law that it's illegal or something?
Yeah, yesterday they moved to essentially say that within 60 days you're not allowed to Uber. Probably what they're going to do is try to make everyone get licenses like they've done in other cities, and have each individual driver maybe do some sort of like say they're a stripper. When you're a stripper in the US, you got to go to the city and you have to get a card in order to allow you to dance naked inside of a building. And they'll do the same thing here for people driving other people in cars. And,
yeah, because that reputation system on Uber isn't good enough. We need some bureaucrat to double check, right?
I don't think Tijuana is going to be able to pull that off, and a lot of the locals here don't think they'll be able to. Just imagine people from Mexico City coming here and being like, "You don't have Uber? Oh, so you're in the Stone Age." But Uber really makes this city run a lot better. I think that there's a lot of things to figure out in the gig economy and the Uber market. Those drivers really aren't making so much money to glorify it. A lot of people have people puke in their cars, and then you get like $150 fee. And while that might make everything look real spot clean, it doesn't get rid of that smell from what I hear. And so as far as how Uber works in TJ, it's by far the easiest way to get around. You can go 10 blocks for $2. From here to Centro, it's probably like $5 basically, and it's about a 15-minute drive tops. And Uber really has helped me get around in Tijuana. In San Diego, you got to pay in US dollars there, which maybe an argument could be made they're a little bit overinflated. And
well, that's the great thing right now about Mexico is the peso has dropped so much. It's almost free to live here now. When I first arrived, it's funny, you mentioned this taco place called Taco Nacho, I believe.
Taco
Nacho. And you said it was really good. And the first place I went when I came here was Taco Nacho, and it was really good. And the tacos were huge and just full of stuff, and it was like 20 cents for a taco. Incredible.
That really has hurt peso earners. Everyone here who earns dollars is pretty happy for their own personal gain in that situation. Some prices have gone up at certain places that are frequented by tourists, but generally everything stayed the same in Tijuana, and I guess probably the whole border region. Mexicali is about an hour and a half east of us in the desert, and that's really hurt peso earners. But it definitely has made people making dollars. It made the dollar go a lot further, and who knows what's going to happen with the peso. It seems to have kind of steadied here because it fell from like 12 to 14 and then 14 to 16 pretty quickly, and now it's kind of hanging out at, I haven't checked it lately, but it's about 16 to 1.
Yeah, I find in Acapulco it's almost like living for free for me, because I make most of my money in dollars or gold or Bitcoin, and I definitely don't make it in Mexican pesos. So that's part of the permanent traveler lifestyle, or the perpetual tourist, is if you can make your money in other currencies in other places where the economy's better or it's just a higher currency, and then live somewhere where it's much cheaper, you can live a great lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. A business owner in San Diego at Tostada, his name's Jerry, I believe, Gerald. He made a good point. He's kind of lived across the border growing up, but he's an American, and he said that his restaurant Tostadas accepts Bitcoin, and he said, living this life, going to pesos, going to US dollars, really made it easier for him to kind of imagine how Bitcoin works, because the added currency exchange where you got to get a calculator out for division problem doesn't really bother him. But I think it bothers some Americans. I think Joe Rogan admitted that he couldn't do division. I can't do most division.
Well, we all went to government public schools, so didn't really learn much, got indoctrinated, and I think you did your Pledge of Allegiance a few thousand times. But yeah, you know, just being here, just sitting near this wall, which is disgusting in my opinion, anti-human. And you were pointing out, and I'll have some footage that we can maybe throw up of there's names printed on the wall of, well, tell us about these Americans who got sent out of the U.S. even though they're Americans to Mexico just because they're Mexican heritage.
As you can see in the Vice documentary, Deported Veterans of America, there's a lot of people who served in the U.S. military who were deported because they joined the military under the notion that they were going to get U.S. citizenship, and for whatever reason that didn't really work out for them, and one day they got pulled over for, you know, running a stop sign or a DUI or what have you, and this led to them being deported. And a lot of these veterans didn't even speak Spanish. So in that documentary you can see just, you know, red-blooded Americans basically being like, I don't know, I joined the military and then they deported me to Tijuana, because Tijuana and Mexicali are where most of the deportees are sent, which has created a huge crisis in Tijuana. According to the local police and a lot of the local residents, is that the United States will just drop all the deportees, even if they're from Central America, in Tijuana. And a lot of them don't have identification, so that means they can't really get jobs. And then they start getting mixed up with police because you have to have identification on you, but they don't. And they're poor, they live in the canal. They're known for having lived in the canal, but the canal was recently cleaned out. So a lot of these deported individuals went to the eastern mountains and kind of live in like empty shacks. In fact, some of them live here in Playas. There's a lot of undeveloped would-be, I guess, apartments, and you can get into them easily. They're basically just like a big concrete slab in the form of a building.
Yeah, and a lot of those people from Central America get really used and abused a lot here. Really sad. Everything to do with government is always sad, you know. Without all these borders, people could just move whenever they want, and they could get a job wherever they want. They wouldn't need identification or anything like that. And you pointed out how Uber makes everything better. So we're moving towards a economy that's free of governments, and the free market always does a better job. And now things like Uber are really showing it. And one of the things that you've been doing, and you are, is a journalist, and you've decided somewhat to move to this side of the border and report on what's going on here for the American media as well.
Yeah, you know, and mostly on kind of like Tijuana promotion, because I think a lot of my friends are really scared. I have grown men all the time telling me that they're too scared to come down to Tijuana, and when I cross the border there's like all these beautiful young 20-year-old girls like crossing the border by themselves, like talking on their cell phones, like, you know, cutting in front of me because I drive like a gringo. And it's my friends, millennials as well, same sort of mentality in a lot of cases. I went to a punk show in Playas, one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. Some people put on like a 10-band punk show because they were being evicted because they had too many shows there before. So they had one last like show on the last night they were there. And there were bands from Santa Cruz, there were bands from Tijuana, there were bands from San Diego, all night, big party, had a lot of fun. And I posted a lot of pictures to Facebook, and my friends mentioned to me how dangerous it had looked. And it just was, all the photos were just of a punk show, pretty much. But just because it had that Tijuana thing and everyone was maybe brown skin or something, a lot of my friends just were a little scared. And I think that's something we got a healthy dose of, was a lot of misinformation about what Tijuana was like. I think there are problems with narco violence. Everyone here seems to know a story or have been somewhat, you know, a few people removed from a story.
And again, that's all caused by the government's war on drugs. Without that, everything would be fine. But,
and in a lot of cases, people say that, you know, my friend or whoever kind of was mixed up with the wrong people. A lot of young people who get a little crazy, you know, and we see the same sort of behavior in the US where people go too crazy and end up like hanging from street signs in LA. I don't know if you heard that story, but some young kid was just driving crazy, living on the edge, got into a car accident, and wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and his body was ejected and was landed on a street sign. And so that's just another extreme of just living on the edge, and people can get tied up in that stuff anywhere. And in Tijuana, for your typical person coming here to visit, really the only issue I've ever come across is the Tijuana Shakedown, is the $20 get out of this little universe that envelopes you and the police officers, where all of a sudden like they're asking you all these questions, and I learned actually that you can actually have 5 grams of marijuana in Tijuana. You just can't smoke it, sell it, or buy it.
But you can have it.
You can have it though.
Yeah, so we should let people know that you actually run the Dollar Vigilante group here. I'll put a link to that down below. You have to be a TTV subscriber to get access, but I think it's one of the best ways to get access to people around the world. If you want to travel or even move somewhere, it's a great way to connect with people. So we'll leave that at that. We'll leave Tijuana. And let's get into Bitcoin just a little bit. You've been following Bitcoin for years. You've been involved in the Bitcoin business. What's your take on what's going on with Bitcoin right now?
You know, there's a lot of stuff going on with the Bitcoin price, and in times of sort of depressed prices, I always say that the price is pretty irrelevant in Bitcoin, that its functionality is really the heart of it. And I think that's probably what Satoshi Nakamoto was looking at accomplishing when he designed it. A lot of people use it as a savings vehicle, and for me personally, I think it's a little bit early to be used as a savings vehicle, but it's definitely a fun and intriguing speculative vehicle. And right now we're seeing it run possibly because of demand in China, as a lot of people have mentioned. There's also a new exchange in the US, Gemini Exchange, which was started by the Winklevoss twins, and they had a hand in starting Facebook. They're well known for having sued Mark Zuckerberg for allegedly taking their idea. That's probably an oversimplification, but that's kind of the headline version. And they're in Bitcoin now, and they set up an exchange that is regulated. And I think that for a lot of people, a lot of investors, having this sense of security of government regulation or stock market regulation gives them a sense of security, and it could bring a lot of big money into the market. So perhaps there's something going on with that. The Gemini Exchange opened up about 3 weeks ago maybe, and there's been a lot of active price increase in the wake of that. We see a lot of big companies always adopting Bitcoin. A lot of them maybe kind of step away from it after they realize that people are kind of holding on to Bitcoin as a speculative instrument and not so much spending it. But those at a certain point seem to really have ceased having an putting upward pressure on the Bitcoin price. But perhaps this Gemini Exchange was sort of an exception and has opened up a lot of avenues. There's actually a little bit of a Bitcoin community in Tijuana. In San Diego, it's very active. As I said, Tostadas accepts Bitcoin in North Park. Here, there are a couple of Bitcoin ATMs I know of, but they don't have really too many Bitcoins in them. There's I think what is a classic Tijuana Bitcoin photo of a Bitcoin ATM here on Instagram. You can see it in an article I wrote for Crypto Coins News called Barriers to Growth for Bitcoin in Baja California. And it's just a pigeon on basically what's like a vacant Bitcoin ATM. And I think it's this kind of iconic Tijuana image. There's not enough infrastructure in not only Tijuana, but a lot of poor cities across the globe. I'm sure in Acapulco too. I know in a lot of Central American countries and South American countries, for people who I talk to, the big obstacle is underdevelopment in infrastructure for pretty much internet, first and foremost. And then, people don't necessarily have the means to, set up a exchange account on their version of Coinbase or what have you. So, from what I hear, demand out of China has increased. I think we mostly, as Bitcoiners, don't have a lot of the information. I think there's a certain aspect of Bitcoin where there's a lot of people with a lot of money in Bitcoin, and then there's a lot of people, more people per head count, in a head count manner, who are pretty much working for like $10 an hour or less in the Bitcoin market. And this could change. There's a lot of promise for the future in the Bitcoin space, especially with the Bitcoin price. But here in the now, I think that we kind of have this disconnect between really kind of deeply embedded players who take all shapes and forms, and then sort of this Bitcoin mass, which there definitely is a Bitcoin mass. There's a lot of people who are making pennies in Bitcoin.
Yeah, there's so many. It's so interesting to see the creation of money happen in our lifetimes. It started in 2009, of course. And there's so many opportunities in the space. And of course, you started goldsilverbitcoin.com. I think you started that a few years ago.
Yeah, in 2012.
So you're entrepreneurial. Here's somebody who wants to talk to us. No. Estamos en entrevista, por favor. Gracias. So he wanted some money for food. We're a little busy. Maybe another time. But you started goldsilverbitcoin.com. And tell us a little bit about that and what it's all about, and then also tell us a little bit about what you think in the precious metals market is going on right now. It's been pretty quiet lately.
It has been quiet. Gold Silver Bitcoin, it's a retailer. I accept Bitcoin for gold and silver, and it's also a a news center. So I've been writing a lot of articles. I write a lot for a lot of different press outlets in the Bitcoin scene. Pretty much every single one of them I've written something for. And I continue this at Gold, Silver, Bitcoin, especially a lot of notes, especially in the gold and silver markets. I cover a lot of those at Gold, Silver, Bitcoin. And I found that I got the domain name. I had the idea to buy the domain name. I feel like that's probably one of the better decisions I've probably made in my entrepreneurial career. And I've had fun with it ever since. It's pretty interesting. It's been tiring because Bitcoin has been depressed, gold and silver have been real depressed, and that's something I didn't really prepare myself for. I entered into the gold and silver scene, and then I entered into the Bitcoin scene, and I started doing pretty well. There was a lot of demand, and as soon as the bottoms fell out of those markets, I realized that my income wasn't so anti-fragile. It was kind of dependent on these contrarian investments, gold, silver, and Bitcoin. And demand for gold and silver really fell. I see this at all levels. There's been a big consolidation in the gold and silver retail level, at the miner level. A lot of miners have laid off workers in the last few years. Retailers have laid off workers. Wholesalers have bought retailers. Even in the Bitcoin space, some of the gold and silver retailers have kind of been consolidated. And that's something you see in turbulent markets, I think, generally. And as far as the gold and silver price, we've seen a lot of activity in it, but I do sort of look at it like maybe a localized version of gold and silver. I think one of the more interesting things, to bring up Adam Kokesh once more, that he sort of wrote his book, and it's really hammers home the importance of localism, of really getting embedded in your communities, which is kind of why I moved into Tijuana, because San Diego and Tijuana aren't one thing. It's San Diego and Tijuana. And there's just some people from 3,000 miles east of us built a big wall in between it. And he talks a lot about localism, and I sort of see gold and silver as this transactional solution, especially silver at the local level. And not only is it a speculative vehicle, but its history has shown us that it does very well as a savings vehicle. And that will remain true. A lot of people will get into the gold price and want to make a lot of money, and they'll buy a lot over a small amount of time. But for those people that have been following it and buying into it slowly in the long term since the 90s, a lot of people bought gold going into the war in 91, the Gulf War, because they thought that was going to kind of break it out of the 300 level and send it to the proverbial moon, if you will. And it didn't, but a lot of people bought it, held on to it, and then into the 2000s, that's when you kind of saw it come alive. And those people, it could go down to $1,000, and it's almost there. I mean, it could go down to 800, and they'd be bummed. But it's really the people who are buying a lot at one time instead of price averaging themselves, who are going to get burned. And I think that'll stay true in the gold and silver market.
We'll see. So we're running out of light here. Is there anything else you wanted to cover?
But we have a beautiful sky behind us. It's actually interesting because most of that sky above the flag, it's just blue painting. But, for those who live in Southern California and those who live anywhere on the border, I highly recommend, getting into Facebook groups. Like you kind of caught on to the Facebook group. You're kind of actually a thought leader in the Facebook group. These Facebook groups, because everybody's on Facebook, are really the best place to get information. And there's so much information being shared in the groups. I've joined groups across the spectrum, from gold and silver to Burning Man. And that's really where I stayed on top of trends. Uber as a really interesting, informative group as well. Join the border groups. Figure out what's going on here in Mexicali and in Ciudad Juarez, although I don't really have any firsthand experience there. In Tijuana especially. And kind of recognize that, yeah, it's a pain getting in and out because of this border. It's really just one big concrete rock here in Southern California, including TJ.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll leave it at that. We're running out of light. So final comment here. Mr. Obama, tear down this wall. It's horrible, heinous, anti-human, anti-freedom borders. And so that's it for, go ahead.
Yeah, du bist ein Berliner, yeah? That actually means a jelly roll.
It's good. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
concept of digital scarcity really, really excited me because I knew this was going to pave the way for entirely new industries to be built upon this concept. And it's really digital scarcity. I can't really stress that term enough. It's a new word that, you know, in the 21st century, we're going to have to get used to because we're used to unlimited data.
Bitcoin is not only the coin, as we most know, and I hope more people will get into this and see that it's not only a coin, but it's also a system. One of these applications, of course, is Bitcoin, and it's also a financial system. It's the most transparent and uncorruptible system I have seen from the insights up till now.
DNS is the secret sauce that makes it all work. So all of the current and future battles over control, over choke points, over freedom of speech, what's permitted, what's not permitted, it's all going to take place in the DNS sphere.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.